Hi, Miriam. Welcome. Thank you so much for participating in this project. How are you today?
Good. Today is a wonderful day. Thank you so much for the invitation, Rafa.
No, thank you. And as I mentioned to you and people watching, this is a space we're creating where we're inviting international experts such as yourself who work with different business initiatives around the world in different markets to talk about the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in the country. So we're not going to get into technical aspects. It's really talking about how this cultural communication aspect affects the business transactions or relationships between people in different countries. So I will ask seven specific questions, and we will start now. The first question, Miriam, is for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself. What kind of work do you do? You're in Canada. A little bit about your background, if you will, please.
I'm a Colombiana in Canada. I arrived in Canada like 16 years ago, I think. It has been a wonderful time, wonderful decision. Always work in my home country, different type of initiatives. I will say that I've been always an entrepreneur. It's kind of part of the genetics in my family, I guess. And yeah, moving to Canada, I've been working in the last almost 8 years with different technology entrepreneurs through global startups before, formerly Latam startups. And it has been an amazing experience to work with startups from everywhere. At the beginning, most of the time from Latin America, and now, from different parts of the world. So we have people from Nigeria, Pakistan, India, different places and different cultures. So of course, more than happy to talk here about the cultural differences and all that, because that's what I have been experiencing the last 7, 8 years here with Global.
No, it's wonderful, and it's in Canada is such a country that invites immigrants, professionals from all over the world, and that's what makes it so diverse. It is one of the most diverse countries, and Toronto is one of it's the most international city in the world, correct?
The most
So
multicultural city in the world. Yeah.
there you go. So it's very rich in this cultural aspect, and even interesting when you do business. You can learn about different cultures just in that city itself. And I will post more information for everybody watching about global startups in the article that we're writing, so you can learn more about it as well. So thank you for that, Miriam. The second question, it focuses a little bit more on what would you recommend people to do or say when they come to their first meeting or speaking with a person that they might initiate a new project or business opportunity together in Canada, and also what should they not do or say in this first encounter with someone in the Canadian market.
Well, I'm assuming most of your audience at the beginning are going to be Latin American, so I'm going to go with some of the
Sure.
things that are more. I think it's most in the in different aspects. For newcomers arriving into mature countries like US or Canada. But I will say the first thing is just going to the point. To meetings. So what they should say is exactly what they are looking for. And I know for some cultures, it's very difficult to actually be direct to the point. And this wonderful book, the cultural map, was telling how so many cultures are implicit in communication and some others are very explicit. US is the most explicit, and then Canada is the second most explicit. So I will say, without to be embarrassed about what you are going to ask or whatever, just go direct to the point. What are you looking for? Because that's actually showing respect to the other person that is in that meeting. Actually, you're respecting their time. And they are not there for to be, chatting with you for an hour. If it goes to an hour, then great. But it's, people have very little time. So meetings sometimes can be 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So you have to be very precise, very, very precise. And what things not to say, again, like if you are going with something, asking for an advice, asking for, not sure, whatever is the point of your meeting, you should be at the end not ask for any phone numbers or WhatsApp. because it's one of the things that, just people don't necessarily give the phone number or the WhatsApp. All communication goes through email. So that's the most important, one of the most important aspects, to understand that people are very private about their own information, which in Latin America we share a lot. They share way less here. So just be mindful that is not that people don't like you or something like that. It's just, just keep it professional through email.
No, excellent. Perfect description. Don't take it personal, right? Yeah, in our countries, in my own country, is people already asking for your Facebook account and your WhatsApp. So you have to adapt to the local. Just a quick question, though, from your experience over the years in Canada, have you seen the foreigners who go to immigrate there and work there? Have you seen them adapt? Or it's possible to adapt. How hard has it been? But yeah. What is your impression on over the years how they've developed or adapted to the local scenery, right?
Hard. Most of them have a hard time adapting. Um, what my impression normally has been that most people that I know really love the country and love the people here, because I have to say Canadians are so helpful. They always want to help and support initiatives. They're very open people to take you to the next step, let's say. But there are boundaries and limits that in our cultures are normally overpassed. So what you said about, for example, Facebook, that's something that people wouldn't do here. But I've seen people like not from our cohorts of startups or things like that, but people that I know personally that they have been here 20 years and they still live in their countries, in their minds. Like it's still not understanding why people, for example, they get offended because somebody didn't say good morning. People don't care here to say good morning many times. They just may, say hello by saying what's up or something like that. I don't know, like there are, again, because there are so many different cultures, you have to be very sensitive and very, open about, respecting limits from the others. So yeah, so many people have very hard times understanding other cultures, understanding, to be sensitive over other people, backgrounds, so things like that, like we come from, I believe, in Latin America, from very conservative and very homogeneous type of society. When I say homogeneous, is that you can come maybe from a Catholic or Christian society, where most people share the same values. While Toronto and many of the other places in North America actually are a mix of so many cultures that they is not homogeneous at all. So that's why I feel like it's very difficult for people to adapt, to be open and to be respectful about the others people life and work around. So kind of see many people being judgmental, or maybe even for their own businesses. Sometimes they don't understand why people are not buying their products or buying their services. And many times it's the approach, and they don't learn, over the time. They just want to do their way. So, and you learn your way or the highway. It will be like in some point you will learn in the hard way that things are different and you need to adapt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Miriam. And that ties in a little bit to the third question regarding cultural understanding. The question is, we recognize that it is important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business. What cultural aspects might be considered when doing business in Canada? You mentioned a little bit that of being sensitive, adapting to the local the local diversity that exists in Canada. But so what else would you think would be important to take into account in terms of cultural understanding, cultural aspects of the Canadian cultural aspect, right?
Yeah, so first understanding that Canadians are mainly, or most of them immigrants, right? The only ones that are not immigrants are maybe First Nations. But other than that, everyone else comes from, somewhere else, or second, third, fourth generation, whatever it is. But it's always coming with roots with somewhere else. But if you are talking about white Canadians, the ones that immigrated first, in Canada, the ones that maybe are second, third generation, business-wise, again, they tend to be very direct. And many times, I will say that Canadians sometimes can be a little bit Latin American in a way that, they don't want to tell you no. Like they sometimes they avoid conflict. They avoid conflict. So this is different from the Americans. Americans tend to be very straightforward, up to the point, and they tell you yes, no. In Canadians are always a big maybe. So and many times the way to understand if somebody doesn't want to do business with you, sometimes unfortunately is by ghosting you. If they don't respond, maybe your second email or third email, just stop, chasing them. Like if you are talking with somebody and then, this person say, hey, just shoot me an email. It should be okay. I will follow up, and that person never follow up. So that's a sign that that the person was just being nice, but they didn't want to tell you no, right? So there are many aspects. Also kind of like when they are talking with you, many times when they say, "Oh yeah, this is interesting." It depends of the tone of the voice, right? Interesting tend to be no, they are not interested. Uh, or if they say something like, oh, cool. Many times it's like, no, I don't get it. I don't, I don't, I'm, I'm not interested on this. Many, of course, because of the type of word, you kind of like take it literally, like, oh yeah, they are actually interested, or just they actually thought it was cool. But they just were being nice. So many times that's kind of like what happens. But most of the time I will say that there is not super necessity to read between lines with Canadians. The other thing is that we'll say business wise, punctuality is important. Somebody is asking you to be at certain time. Punctuality means that you have to be there 5 minutes before that time. So you start the meeting on time. And I will say also, whatever you said, whatever you promise, you just have to do it. So people have here, one saying like, I forgot now to say. But it's basically, whatever you are going to promise in a negotiation, even if, if you are starting very early to just, send in a proposal or something like that, just keep in mind to have dates, to have times. And if you said this is going to be sent by Monday 2 p.m., you will be sending it by Monday 2 p.m. because they're very punctual people, and they really are expecting that you are going to be actually meeting those deadlines. Yeah, so those are kind of the things that I come to top of my mind for now, but certainly there are many other things. Oh, one thing is that when they said between the lines, when you are in a negotiation and they say, oh, by the way, I need to have XYZ, and they never tell you things are mandatory, but when they said something is optional, normally it's mandatory. So they just reinforce saying like, this is important, or, just, understand this is going to be important for us. It's not mandatory, it's optional, but they tend to say in a way that is very like, I will say it's passive aggressive, it's kind of like, the way that they try not to enforce the situation, but You should be understanding that you should send whatever they ask you if it's in the middle of a negotiation.
No, well pointed out, and noted taken here. Everybody watching it definitely have to take notes of this, thinking when they're coming to the Canadian market, who they're dealing with, and if it's optional, it's mandatory. That's a very good tip. So, thank you, Miriam. The fourth question regarding it's mostly of the language. If someone does not speak English or French in some parts of Canada, as we know, the two official languages are French and English. If they don't speak English or French, what do you suggest a foreigner do to be able to communicate more successfully with the locals in Canada in order to do business and actually to interact with the locals if they don't speak the language?
Well, this is another difference with the US. Unfortunately, in the US, you have a big Latin American community, and you will get away to have like a low level of English communication.
Mhm.
Here, you can't really, for business, you can't. You have to communicate. It doesn't. It's one thing is I want to maybe straight the point that is not about your accent.
Mhm.
It's not about your accent. Everyone has an accent here. Like, people have an accent. It's about how you communicate. Okay, is like you can have English speakers that communicate badly what they supposed to, to negotiate or whatever. So it's getting those skills to actually communicate the right idea and the right action taken in negotiation part. So having said that, really, like, at least a conversational level is required. And if you are not really in a conversational English level, then I will say, even if you take some training sessions at home, I'm particularly not super fan of doing that. I think the best that people can do is to actually visit the country, and maybe, if possible for the person, actually have a job where they can have a level of a conversation with some other people, because many times, courses are not, actually the real life conversations that you're going to have. It can be helpful, but people can be really, like, disappointed about the results. You think that you actually are speaking English, and people are like, what? People normally will be, again, Canadians are very nice, and they are going to tell you, like, you speak better English than my Portuguese, because they don't have Portuguese. So they always try to help, but that's more like in a touristic level. When we are talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
business, they are expecting that you are going to be actually communicating at a certain level. So if not, they are going to feel a little bit frustrated with the exchange of ideas of what could develop from that conversation.
No, excellent points. And one thing you mentioned, a lot of people say, either jokingly or not, that Canada's like the United States. It's very similar to everything. But you see exactly what you said now. The language in the United States, you do have, you can do business in Spanish in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So in Canada, there is that distinct challenge, let's say, when if you don't speak the language. So businesses that are looking to the Canadian market should take into account, or work with someone that does speak English, hire somebody that speaks English. But the points are well taken, and thank you for clarifying that. Going to the fifth question, Miriam, to get better results in visibility or sales, what are your recommendations on the most effective ways to do marketing for products or service in Canada? And this question is more targeting the marketing channels. What do they use more there? What kind of social media? What should a foreign company think about to set up when they come into the Canadian market?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. That's the first channel everybody uses. I know that in many Latin American countries, we tend to think LinkedIn is just to find a job. But here it's really like a business tool. Is it really a business tool? Now, I remember, reading some comments from people in the past saying, I don't get LinkedIn, I don't get, people are not responding to me, and things like that. Of course, there are different reasons why people are not responding to you, and one of the reasons could be like okay, let's say like the most, probably the top reason they don't want to do business with you. That's the main reason. Okay, you didn't have a good LinkedIn profile or a clear LinkedIn profile where you describe exactly what you do and what you are looking for in another person, and you're trying to look for another person either to buy your product or service, or maybe to just have a chat about picking the brain of this other person. But if you don't go with a very clear LinkedIn profile, it's because sometimes I do that also. Like I go and look at the person who's trying to connect with me. If I don't see any affinity per se, I'm like, why I'm going to connect, right? So it's very important that people actually connect with the person and actually send a note, saying why they want to connect with the person. That will be important. And even if you are like with intention to sell something, please don't sell it right away, because nobody likes to be sold. Nobody likes it. Like, you get these mails, when 2, 3 paragraphs telling you, how wonderful your product is or your service, and you should be having a conversation with this person, and this is my Calendly. It's many times that type of approach that doesn't work either. And the worst approach I ever had is just send me a note saying hola, or hi, or how are you? Like, LinkedIn is for no for chatting. So I'm not going to start chatting with you there. Like, and it's not because, I'm being so, I snobby here. Like, it's more like, I don't have time. Like most people have, 8, 10 calls per day. They have meetings. I have meetings, so you be, again, going back to be respectful of the time of other people, right? So the LinkedIn approach is very different to the Facebook approach or maybe Instagram approach, but it's the most used tool, and you have to know how to use it in the best way, and that you are not burning your network, you are not, maybe sending the incorrect words, to connect with another person. And just be mindful that some people are not just going to like your LinkedIn, so just, find the next one. Okay, as somebody will like to work with you, and I always said, like, you don't waste time with people that don't want to work with you or trying to chase somebody just because. um Sometimes also happens that you can be connecting with somebody in LinkedIn that can introduce you with actually the person that you want to talk. But again, going to the point, what is that somebody can spend with you 15 or 30, why they should do that, not just like oh, I want to learn about your company, and it's so amazing, so successful what you have done, and I want to learn about that. You learn about that, just read my profile. It's like, that's not the reason for why I'm going to enter into a chat. Many people don't do that. In the second network, I will say, is actually X, or formerly Twitter, and is the other network that is like extremely useful for business. Many people use it here. Latin America is zero on that. This is like, yeah, but here is very active, between business owners and people that, in general want to speak differently and have chats with other people, like, about specific topics. So very important to learn how to use those two from business perspective.
Great insights. The companies should take note. Think of creating their business profile on LinkedIn as well. So, great insights. Thank you, Miriam. Moving to the sixth question, I came up with this question thinking more of how to create empathy and connection with people, right? So the question is, if a business partner in Canada wants to get to know you better, invites you to a local coffee, tea place, a restaurant, or even virtual happy hour, what kind of topics people in Canada like to talk about that's not related to business? So it's really focused on connecting with a human being, creating empathy. What would they be talking about while you're drinking a
The
coffee?
weather. that's that's almost impossible not to talk about. It's the weather. It's always the weather. I think, this country is so wonderful that the only thing that people can complain is about the weather. This is the only topic that we talk about. Oh, they were so great today. No, tomorrow is like awful, or whatever. Like, you can always sympathize with people about the weather.
Okay.
And yeah. And the other aspects that, they like to talk, very Canadian men, hockey, eh, sports. Some of the guys, of
Okay.
course, they get into sports. I'm not a sports person, so I'll go with the weather type. Uh, but if you want to talk about something different, that will be it. And some other people also like to touch base in food. Some people are foodie people. In the most important, I think, like, sometimes, depending culturally where you're coming from, sometimes people are afraid to have strong opinions about certain things. People in North America really like to argue over topics. As far as you are not coming into, what is it called? Optional facts. What is it called?
Uh-huh.
It's like when you're coming to a place where you don't have something to back up your side,
Right.
then people are not going to take you seriously. But if you have a strong opinion over something and you actually have a point, they actually are going to respect your point of view, and they will get an opinion of your strong personality over that, which many people sometimes love that. So yeah. Here, in the States, people normally said, I respectfully disagree with you on this,
Sure.
and in things like, we can agree to disagree, in many aspects, but they really like to get to the argue, but the smart argue, no,
Right.
not conflictive argue, just a smart argue.
Like respectful discussions and not getting too sensitive, but it's a good dialogue you can get together.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you are agreeing with all the other person is telling you, the other person are going, like, a little bit of, okay, just, you know, um, not really, like, this person doesn't have a strong opinion or
Yeah.
doesn't have their own opinion, like, it's okay, like, you can probably, make your argue about something that you disagree on. And I'm thinking about, in particular, technology. Like, we have so many topics in technology, just to touch base on one, in AI. Like, some people are super, like, the one side that AI is going to kill us all, and the
Sure.
others are like, oh, AI is actually helping us. Then you can have, strong opinions over, what is happening in AI. But if you have to have some facts also to kind
Sure.
of back up your opinions, right? So, and people will respect that. People read a lot of books here, a year, and they really are kind of like really connected with, what is happening in the world. So you should be, like, more vocal about what you think about certain things, and enter into those discussions around it are very important also when networkings.
Great. No, and at least for the weather conversation, your native Colombia has amazing weather. You can always bring that up in your discussions with weather there in Canada. How nice it is in Colombia, the weather all the time.
I'm the worst Colombian ever, so I don't
Oh,
use things. But yeah, so we always have conversations around weather. The beginning kind of is always the kind of, hello, how about the weather today?
sure, but
So,
hey, it's something someone can
yeah,
take note of. Check the weather out in Canada before you arrive, and something to talk about. It's more of breaking the ice and connecting with them as a person,
that's right.
creating empathy, right? No, great, thanks, Mary. The last question is very straightforward and but just as important as perhaps all the others. Um, what one word should everyone learn to say in English and perhaps French in Quebec or other parts? And why should they know this word when they get to Canada?
Oh, that's a tough one, Rafa. I think it's most of the time, especially for Spanish speakers, Portuguese speakers, the may I instead of can I. Because
Interesting.
yeah, I will say, people get a strong reactions with the can I have, or instead of
Mhm.
may I have. And so just, be mindful every time that you go to a place and you are asking for something is may I have?
Hey.
Yeah, yeah. So it's, I will say that's one. And in French Canadian, if you are in a French province, to save yourself from, a strong French reaction, you start, whatever conversation with bonjour, hi. The
Okay.
bonjour goes first,
Okay.
hi after. And this is just to be respectful with the other person because you never know if the other person is a French Canadian or an English Canadian. So, if it's a French Canadian, they are going to appreciate that you are starting with the bonjour. And if it's an English Canadian, then at least will understand that you don't speak French by saying just the hi after, or that they can speak with you in English just by saying that after.
Oh, very useful. I've been to Canada, and I didn't know that. I'm going to take note to say, may I? No, it's very important. It makes a difference in the first impression when you start talking to someone. So, absolutely. Thank you so much, Miriam. We're finishing. I wish we could talk for hours more, but I wanted to thank you, Miriam, for being part of this project. Your insights, recommendation, your valuable experiences. I hope this interview also benefits you and the programs that you work with at Global Startups. I hope it can bring more opportunities. And also for the startups looking to go to Canada, I think it's an interesting entry point for them to come into North America through Canada, through their programs. So thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time. Very useful, very insightful, all your tips. Any last commenting words?
No, I hope that most people come to Canada, more people come to Canada to visit or maybe, to do business in the future. I know the World Cup we are going to have, in between Mexico, Canada, and US, the Tres Amigos. So, take advantage of that. Maybe, have an opportunity to meet this wonderful country is with a lot of surprising advances in technology in particular. That's my topic. But I think that, people will be highly surprised about, what they can find here in regards of, the type of life and, the connections that you can have is just an amazing place to live and grow a business as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Have a great day. Thank you again. Bye.
Rafa.